For folks, looks like everyone's hiding their screen. So yeah, great. I'm going to be recording. All right, and we're recording. Okay, so I think we know everybody here now. Well, there might be some folks who are just starting to catch up on Facebook Live too. So hello, everyone watching or participating today. My name's Alex. I'm the program coordinator at Boxhaven, and I'd just like to thank you all for supporting our work amidst the coronavirus shutdowns. Your donations are extremely kind, and every little bit truly helps. Just a little bit about Boxhaven. We are a farm and nonprofit ecological retreat center located in Jefferson, Maryland, less than 10 minutes from Frederick, Maryland, or an hour from Baltimore, DC. And our mission is to help deepen the connection between humankind and the natural world. And we fulfill our mission by growing fresh herbs and using organic and regenerative farm practices and hosting educational classes like this. So we are recording this, and I'm just going to go ahead and let Lacey give a little brief introduction about what we'll be doing today. We're really excited. Thank you all so much.
Hey everyone, it's nice to see you. We will be making some sodas today, and I'll be talking about a couple of different kinds of sodas, and then we'll definitely have time to answer questions. Are there any folks that are planning on making the soda along with us? Like you have all the ingredients and you're ready to make it with us? You can drop a comment or unmute yourself to say yes.
I have almost everything I need, but I've got most things here to hopefully follow along.
Okay, great. Awesome. And do we have any youth today? You know, we said this was a kid-friendly class. Do we have any kids in the audience today? Hey. Awesome. All right, cool. So I'm gonna start by showing a few slides just to kind of get us oriented, and then we'll go ahead and start. But actually, since a couple of you might be making it with me, let's start by getting our whey ready. So I'm gonna turn the camera around so we can see like how to get whey out of yogurt. All right. Okay. So if you're doing this at home with us, then you're gonna want a bowl and a strainer of some sort, like a mesh strainer maybe. And then I always like to put a cloth over it. It can be cheesecloth or it could be like a towel. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy. Vicky, you can definitely use other milks. Yep. Yes. Yeah, I do this with coconut milk as well. I happen to have lactose-free cow's milk here, but you can definitely use coconut or almond. All right, so I'm just opening my yogurt. So like if you go to the grocery store and you buy Greek yogurt, that's yogurt that's been strained and it doesn't have as much of the whey anymore, so it's like a thicker consistency. So what we're going to do is basically make Greek yogurt in a sense by straining off the whey. So I just have my yogurt and I'm just going to pour it into my cheesecloth. All right. Alex, it seems like I'm not the main one on the screen. Is that what it looks like for you too?
I have it as you as the main, but I'll double check on that. Make sure. Let's see.
Might just be my settings actually.
Okay.
All right. So I've just put my yogurt into the cheesecloth and the strainer. And I'm just going to let it sit in this now for, for the next 15 minutes or so while we're talking, and it should strain out some of that whey for us. All right. All right. Just making sure everybody's with us. Good. Yeah, Alex just posted what you need for this particular recipe. It's a fermented lemonade. All right. So I'm going to share my screen so I can share a few slides about soda making while we're waiting for that whey. All right. All right, so herbal and DIY sodas. So this is a picture of a soda I made last year, and you can see a ton of different things in there. There's blackberry leaf, there's red clover, there's honeysuckles, there's spruce tips and some pine needles. So you can really put so many different things into your soda. We can also make really traditional sodas, like a cream soda. We can use vanilla pods to make like a cream soda, or we can make like a lemon lime soda, like like Sprite. But we can get really creative and use lots of different herbs. So there's a few different options for making sodas, and we're going to talk about a couple of them today, but I wanted to list a few more for you. So one is wild, which is using the wild yeasts that are present on plants, herbs, and fruits. In soda we can use. One is a champagne yeast. We can use a yeast that's kind of formulated for making champagne, but also really works really well for sodas because it has a really nice light flavor. You could use bread yeast, like the same yeast that you use for bread, but you're going to get more of a bready flavor actually. And so that kind of lends itself more to something like if you're going to make like a root beer, that might be where you could use a bread flour and it might lend itself well, or like you might use it if you are trying to create like an herbal beer tasting soda. The one that we're also going to talk about today is whey, which is the strained liquid from yogurt. You have a couple of other options as well. Some folks really like to do water kefir, which is a SCOBY grain. And that SCOBY grain is, it's a symbiotic community of bacteria and yeast. That's what SCOBY means. And you feed that SCOBY water and sugar, and I would always put a fig and a lemon slice in there, and you have to feed it every day, pretty much, the water kefir. And so that's a culture that you have to maintain over a long period of time, and you can kind of use it to ferment your sugar water into soda. But it's one that requires, kind of a stewardship. You also have kombucha, which is similar. It's that same symbiotic community of bacteria and yeast, but it's going to look like a big pancake. And that one generally uses black tea and sugar. Some people will also make what's called jun, J-U-N, which is a green tea, and you can use honey with that. I did train my SCOBY to take hibiscus flowers, and that was its main source was hibiscus flowers. And then there's also the ginger bug or turmeric bug, which is another culture where you're shaving ginger or turmeric and feeding it sugar, but you have to continuously maintain that by feeding it more ginger or turmeric. It's like having a sourdough starter where you have to discard and then add more and then discard and then add more. The last one that's also an option is to make syrups. So you could make, for example, an elderberry syrup, or you could make any kind of herbal syrup, and then you can put that into sparkling water. I also like to put oxymels into sparkling water, which is an infusion of vinegar and honey with herbs into sparkling water. And that's another way that you can make a homemade soda. So a few of the things that you're going to need and that we'll use today. Eventually, you might want to get these swing top bottles, which is the bottle here on the left that has that swinging top. When you're first starting out making soda, I would actually recommend maybe using liter soda bottles, like plastic bottles that are reused. The reason that I think that it's really nice to start with plastic, even though I'm not generally a fan of using plastic, is that it lets you feel the pressure so that you don't have too much pressure building in your bottle and you don't have to worry about the bottle cracking or breaking, or in some cases, people will say that they've even had bottles explode. I've never had a bottle explode, but I've certainly had the pressure build so much that when I open it and the soda or whatever I've made just like shoots out of it and goes all over the kitchen. But when you have a plastic bottle, you can feel that it's really hard. You can feel that the pressure is really intense in there. When you have a glass bottle, you can't do that. So if I'm starting a new recipe, maybe something I've never tried before, or I just know that I want to put a lot of sugar in it and it might be really bubbly, then that's when I'm going to use plastic. Or if I'm going to be traveling with it and I'm worried that it's going to break. So swing top bottles for, for long-term use are really great and you can reuse them. And then the plastic bottle is a great place to start, or if you're traveling. On the right there is a funnel. You're going to need a funnel for getting that precious soda into the bottles. And then a strainer of some sort. I have a couple of different strainers that I use, but this is like a small strainer that I would also use for tea. You're going to need a large jar. This is a gallon-sized jar. You can ask the guys at Five Guys, the employees at Five Guys. They will give you their old pickle jars. They're one of the only places I know that still gets pickles in a big glass jar, and they recycle them. So they will oftentimes give them to you if you stop by and ask if they have any. And then you can just clean that out really good, or run it through a dishwasher if you have a dishwasher, and then you can use it for sodas and for other things. You're going to want a long spoon. I like wood, but you can use whatever you like. And then this Pasteur champagne yeast is something that you can buy at brewer supply stores, like in Frederick. If you're in Frederick, we have the Flying Barrel is a store that we have here that you could get this champagne yeast at. You can also order it online. This is the yeast that I was talking about that has a really like light effervescent flavor to it, unlike using bread yeast that's going to give you kind of more of a bready flavor. All right, so let's talk about champagne soda, which is with that champagne yeast. This is a picture of someone making a elderflower soda. So with champagne yeast, you're going to use a packet of yeast, but that one packet is actually good for 5 gallons of soda. And so for each one packet of champagne yeast, I'm actually only using like 1/5 of a packet at a time, and we'll do that together today. You'll gather your herbs and you'll wash your herbs and your fruit, or just pick over them and make sure they're clean. And then you'll fill your gallon jug. You'll add some sugar and you'll stir to dissolve. And then you'll add a little bit of that yeast. And then you'll cover it and you'll stir it a bunch. And then when it starts to bubble, you'll go ahead and put that into a bottle. Down here at the bottom, I've said you need to burp your bottle to prevent explosions and overfizzing. Basically what that means is opening the top, whether it's a swing top or a twisty top. You're going to open the top after you've put it in the bottle so that you can let some of that carbon dioxide and pressure release. And then you want to put it in the fridge to arrest the process. I'm going to go through these kind of quick because we're going to do them in person, and then I can go back through them again and we can talk about them if anybody has questions about them. Whey soda. Okay, so this is what we're doing right now, right? We've got yogurt, and that's, again, any kind of yogurt is fine as long as it's fermented in some way, or a lot of times they'll add probiotics to the yogurt. So as long as it's a live yogurt, then that's not a problem. And you're straining that yogurt so that you can get to the whey, which is where a lot of the lactic acid is going to be hanging out. And this is the whey lemonade that we're going to be making today. So we'll need 1 cup of lemon juice, a 1/2 cup of whey, 6 cups of water, 1 cup of sweetener, and you can add any herbs of your choice, or you could add other fruits. That 1 cup of sweetener, a lot of folks like to use honey. I'm going to use honey today, but you can also use maple syrup. You could use coconut sugar. You can use white sugar, agave nectar. Any of those kinds of sweeteners should be just fine. Something like molasses or sorghum syrup would probably work too. You might need to use a little bit more. It just kind of depends on how sugary, like how sweet they are. And then there's also just considering what the flavor of that sweetener is. And is that a flavor that's going to dominate your soda, or is that a flavor that's going to kind of add and complement your soda? So that's totally a personal choice. All right, and then the other one I said we would talk about is kind of going wild. So this is using wild yeasts, and that's just yeasts are just present around us all the time. They're in the air. They're already on the surface of flowers and herbs and fruits. And so we can just kind of harness those by putting them into an environment with sugar, encouraging them to grow, and then stirring them often so that we're infusing that area, that soda with lots of oxygen. And we're also preventing other things from kind of colonizing or, going on top of the lactic acid that the lactic bacteria that we're hoping to have take over our soda. So you're going to use about 1 to 2 cups of sugar per gallon of water. That's standard pretty much for sodas, anywhere between 1 and 2 cups. I tend to do 1 cup, and my sodas won't be very sweet. They'll be a little on the drier side. So if you want a sweeter soda, you'll go closer to 2 cups. And then you can use whatever fruits you like there. And I'll show you that I don't usually mash my fruits. I tend to put them in just cut. And then you're just going to stir a whole lot. The only thing about not using any sort of starter, right, not using whey, not using yeast, is that when we do it a little bit more wild like this, we're not exactly sure what the flavor profile is going to be like, or we're not sure exactly how long it's going to take for it to start to ferment. And so we have to be a little bit more flexible, and we have to pay a little bit more attention to what's going on. It's kind of like doing sourdough, where we don't really know exactly, we can learn over time how healthy our sourdough culture is and how active it's going to be in different temperatures. But when we use a packet of yeast to make bread, we know very quickly, because that's, a manufactured product, we know what to expect. So we just have to be more flexible with wild sodas. Here's some example of wild sodas that I've made in the past. That one on the left there, I can see the orange peel in there, and there's some chickweed I see, definitely some pine needles. And then the top right is chamomile, and it looks like maybe lemon balm. It looks like a little bit of motherwort as well. And then the bottom one is peach leaf and elderflower. So we're going to put it into a big jar, and we're going to give it a good, couple days of fermenting, and we'll be stirring it every time we can think about stirring it. And then when we start to see and hear fizzing, like when we're stirring it, we start to see that fizzing happening. That's when we know that there's enough action that we can bottle it and we can start to contain that. So what's happening when there's that fizzing is that the yeasts that are present are eating that sugar that we gave it. And one of the byproducts of yeast eating sugar is that it produces carbon dioxide. And that's what makes the bubbles. And so we're going to capture that and put that into a bottle so that we have that nice bubbly soda. And then I get a lot of questions about, is my soda still good? So the way that you know if your soda is still good is, you ask yourself, how does it smell and taste? Does it taste like it's, all of a sudden taste kind of sour, or does it all of a sudden taste kind of moldy, or it smells weird? That's when you know it's probably done, finished, no longer viable for drinking. And then is it alcoholic? You might be able to taste it and say like, oh, that tastes a little bit like alcohol. And maybe that's not what you want. So therefore that soda is no longer good. Is there anything growing in there? Do you see anything floating in there? That might be an indication that it's got past its prime. But generally, when I make a soda, I drink it within a week. Here's some edible flowers you can think about. So we got elderflower, dandelion, violet, lilac, rose petals, bee balm, all kinds of flowers that are, some of which are coming really soon. Black locust is flowering now. Linden and mimosa are coming soon. We already missed things like apple and peach and plum blossoms, but wood sorrel is flowering right now. You also have some flavorful leaves that you can choose from, things like pine needles and mugwort, fennel leaf, all of your culinary herbs like parsley and rosemary. And if you want more flavor, which is always great, think about adding things like dried fruits, the zest from your different citruses, vegetables like carrots and beets, spice bush berries, vanilla beans, brines like leftover kraut juices, especially if you like things to be a little sour or tangy, and even things like hot sauce and peppers. So I wanted to show you a couple of sodas from around the world. This is tepache, which is a fermented pineapple beverage from Mexico. Oftentimes it'll have other spices in it like cinnamon, and I like to put like a habanero pepper in there. So that's using the outside of a pineapple. So if you ever buy a full pineapple and you're cutting the outside of it to make your, to take the skin off so you can get to the inner fruit, keep that outside part of it and make tepache with it. Smreka is a fermented juniper berry beverage from Bosnia. So that's using those little berries that come on the evergreen tree, the juniper. Sweet potato fly is a fermented beverage made with whey that comes from Guyana. And this is a really delicious drink. I highly recommend finding yourself a recipe for sweet potato fly. And then beet kvass is another one. This one's from Russia, and this one is made with a little bit of salt and beets and water. And so it's like more on the salty side of a fermented beverage. All right.
Hey, Lacey, it looks like we have a couple of questions.
Great.
So the first ones are, have you ever used monk fruit or stevia as a sweetener?
I have not. Monk fruit maybe would work. Stevia, I do not think would work because it's not actually, like the sucrose isn't actually in there. It just has like a sweet flavor. So I don't think that would actually work. The thing about making sodas also, right, is like when we put the sugar in there, we're actually feeding the yeast. So we're not putting the sugar in there for us. And especially the way that I make soda, I ferment it until it's dry. So it's almost like a champagne by the time that I drink it because it's got almost no sugar left in it. But you could try it with monk fruit. I don't know enough about monk fruit to know.
And then another question is, would you use an airlock? Well, first someone asked if they could use a bottle capper, which I think wouldn't work, but the airlock component, how does that exactly work? And I'm sure you'll get to that when we actually make it.
Sure. So the bottle capper, I'll answer real quick. I do use a bottle capper for making wine because this is actually the same process as making wild wine. You just use more sugar and you ferment it for a lot longer. So I do use a bottle capper when I'm storing wine. But for making sodas, like these sodas, because they're wild, they're not shelf stable the way forced carbonation is shelf stable. So if you put a cap on it, it's not gonna hold that freshness, and I just don't think that'll work. They've got kind of a short shelf life.
Yeah, you said it only lasts about a week, right?
About a week, yeah. Yep. And then an airlock. I've never used an airlock for this. Part of what we're doing in this the second fermentation phase, where we're putting it into a bottle, is that we are creating a place where the carbon dioxide can't escape. And so if you had an airlock, I would think that it would be letting too much of that carbon dioxide escape, and then you might not ever really get to the potency of bubbles that you're looking for soda. If you want it to last longer in the fridge, the thing is it's still fermenting in the fridge, so it's eventually probably going to start turning into alcohol. That's my experience anyways.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right. So let me turn this around. Okay, so let's check on the whey. All right. So if anybody's doing this at home, go ahead and check on your whey. I feel like I've got maybe, let's see. I feel like maybe I have like a quarter cup maybe. That's how much whey I've gotten so far. So yeah, that's like almost a half cup actually. That's pretty much what we need for making the soda. So I think we can go ahead. When you strain the whey is good for probably up to like 6 months actually in the fridge. So you can stick it in a jar, and that's good for quite a while. Now this yogurt that you have left over, like I said, is Greek yogurt now, so you can use it for lots of different things. And I'm going to make a plug here for Hetty McKinnon's Gozlem. She has these amazing like pocket things like stuffed with cheese and mint, and you make the dough out of just like flour and yogurt, and it's amazing. So look up Hetty McKinnon. Her stuff is great. All right, so I've got my whey, and what I need next is our lemon juice. So I'm going to use a big jar. Can you see this okay? There we go. So I got my whey, got my big jar, and I need lemons. Now it doesn't call for this in the recipe, but I prefer it to be like really lemony. So I'm going to use the zest before I take the juice. So I just have my zester here, and I'm just going to zest some of the lemon into my jar. And being careful not to get the white part, the pith. I just really want that outer lemon, you know, the outer yellow part. All right, so that's maybe like a tablespoon or so of lemon zest. And I keep a little container in the freezer, actually. Anytime I bring lemon or lime or any sort of citrus into the house, I always zest it and put it in the freezer. And that way, when I want to make soda or throw it into a pasta dish or something like that, I already have it frozen and ready. All right, and so now we need a cup of lemon juice. I'm gonna make my lemon juice. I'm gonna throw my whey in there. Excuse me. I'm just straining the seeds and everything off my lemons.
Someone asked, is the pith pretty bitter for the lemon, on the lemon?
It is, yeah. It's not the end of the world if you get some in there. You probably won't be, you know, so much that it'll be a problem, but the really flavorful part is that outer part. Now, if I'm making like a medicinal soda and I want it to be a little bit bitter, then probably I would add some of that pith.
And somebody asked, is it okay if the end result, like if you let it go a little too long, if it turns to alcohol, is it basically not good to drink, or?
Oh no, it's fine to drink, yeah. You just have to be aware that it's now has some alcohol in it.
Right.
All right. I find usually like 2.5 or so lemons is like how much you need for a cup. Depends on how big the lemons are, but that's usually about what I'm looking for. Were folks able to get some whey out of their yogurt that are doing this at home?
Yep, it looks like Anna says she's got about a half a cup of whey, and Eric says yes, he's got the whey.
Perfect.
He strained his yesterday, very prepared, excellent.
Awesome. Okay, I'm almost there. And you could mix this up, right? You could do half lemons and half limes. You could throw an orange in there if you wanted to, or if there's other kinds of citrus that you really like. All right, I've got my cup or so. You can leave the pulp in there if you like, but I just strained most of it out. All right, so that goes into the jar. So now in my jar, I have the lemon juice, the whey, the lemon zest. I'm gonna put some herbs in mine. So I'm gonna put a little bit of rosemary in mine. Rosemary, you really don't need a lot of rosemary. It's kind of like if you're making one with lavender, which I know lavender is really great. A lot of people like to put that in lemonade. You really just don't need a whole lot. If you put too much of this in, it'll really get like kind of resinous and again, might be a little too intense. Your whey looks milky. Yeah, that's fine. It's not clear. It's okay if it is opaque. All right, so I'm putting like half of this stock in there. Maybe a little more than half. Okay, there we go. All right, and then we need a cup of sweetener. I'm going to be using Fox Haven's raw honey. Again, if you want this to be really sweet, then you'll want to use more sugar than this. But 1 cup, I think, is a good place to start.
That looks so good.
Yeah.
By the way, just a quick plug. We are selling those honeys for $8. If anybody is interested, you can connect with us. Either send us a message on Facebook or send us an email.
All right, and then I'm gonna put in my 6 cups of water. So I've got 8 cups here, so this is warm water, not hot, but warm. All right. And now I'm just gonna stir it up. I can feel that honey at the bottom. I can feel that it's not, it's not dissolved in there yet. So I'm gonna stir it until I feel that it's dissolved. And I like to do it in a clear jar like this so I can kind of pick it up and look at it and see like, all right, I see that there's still a little bit of honey kind of at the bottom that I've missed. It's in the middle there. All right. So at this point, now we're waiting for the whey is going to be starting to eat that sugar, right? Eat the honey or eat the white sugar or whatever we put in there. It's going to start consuming that. And the byproduct of that consumption is going to be the carbon dioxide, right? So you have two options. You can put it directly into a jar now if you like, because we have a starter in there, so it doesn't need to be out like the way like a wild will need to be out. But I tend to prefer to keep it out for the first 24 hours. And so what I do at this point is that I put just like a cloth on top of it. This is just a cloth napkin. And I put that top over it. And then for the next 24 hours, I'm going to be stirring it whenever I come through the kitchen, right? So I'll just come through the kitchen and be like, oh, I'm here to make dinner, whatever. I'm going to give it a good stir, and I'm going to stir it pretty vigorously. And then I'll wash my spoon and put that aside again. And after 24 hours, I'll probably start to see some fizzing, and that's when I'm going to put it into a jar. But let's say you want to put it into a jar now, which is totally fine. I have my swing top jars. And I have a funnel. And I'm just going to carefully make sure that it gets into the jars. And I'm going to throw a couple of those rosemaries in there. All right, so you can see that I've filled it up to the neck, right? Like I don't want to fill it all the way up to the top because I want to give it some room to expand, and I want to give it some room to be able to produce bubbles. But I do want to fill it to where the neck starts to narrow, because that's going to help build some of that pressure. And I clamp it down. Here's the same recipe that I made earlier this week. So this one has already gone through its fermentation process, and I actually had it in the refrigerator. I'm going to open it. All right, got a nice bubble there. I don't know if you can see this. It's bubbling really nice. Now I get a glass to see what it tastes like.
Anthony says, not fair, I want some.
I know. All right. So I let this ferment. I made this on Monday, and I let this ferment for, I think, 3 or 4 days actually before I started to see like good bubbles. Like I was testing it every day by opening it like this, right? And if I didn't hear that, or if I didn't see any bubbles forming, then I knew it wasn't ready yet. Once I started to see bubbles though, and I got the kind of bubble action that I wanted, that's when I decided that's enough fermentation. I want it to slow down now, and I'm going to put it in the refrigerator. So I made it on Monday, and I put it in the refrigerator, I think on Thursday. But that's also because it was cold this week. So there wasn't a lot of heat in the kitchen, and so it was fermenting kind of slowly. But if it's a warm day like today, it might ferment really quickly. Actually, you might get bubbles pretty quickly. Within 24 hours, you might have bubbles. Or in the middle of the summer, sometimes within 6 hours, I might get enough bubbles. Vicky, is there a reference we could use to see what herbs taste like? Examples: tart, sweet. Not familiar with mugwort. I could type up some notes to send out after this, just kind of like what the different herbs kind of taste like. Mugwort is a hard one to describe, honestly. It's like kind of, pungent and almost like a little bit licoricey, but yeah, definitely not on the sweet side. Okay, Erica, 24 hours in a jar with a cloth, 3 to 4 days on the counter, bottled, then fridged for 1 week. That's how mine turned out this week. Yes, it might be a little different for you, Erica. Depends on, this weekend's going to be kind of warm, right? So it might be different for you this weekend, where you might end up having you know, it might ferment pretty quickly and you're seeing bubbles and you're seeing like when you go to open it that it's really bubbling up, and that's when you know it's time to put it in the fridge. So you don't need to base it like on my days, but kind of base it on how much carbonation do you want.
Anthony asked, were there any herbs that you found not to be the best, not totally delicious in your soda making experience?
There's definitely herbs to use in small doses. Yarrow, motherwort, mugwort even, I would use in smaller doses. There weren't any that I just thought was like totally unusable, but there was definitely times where I put in too much yarrow and it was just very bitter and sharp. Yeah. Yeah.
And how much sweetener if it's simple syrup? Is there a difference in how much you use?
Simple syrup, I would probably still say like, I would say maybe 1.5 cups of simple syrup. Is that like less sweet than a cup of sugar? I don't know. If it's comparable to a cup of sugar, then still just a cup.
So it doesn't really make a difference based on whether or not you have to feed the yeast or anything like that, or?
No, as long as it's a sugar source.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So this lemonade that I made earlier definitely has like the tart lemon flavor. The way that I fermented it, it probably wouldn't be as sweet as maybe some children would want it to be, but it definitely still has sweetness. So if you wanted it to be a bit sweeter, you might go closer to 1.5 cups of sugar, because I've let it ferment so where that there's not a whole lot of sugar left. Does that make sense? So you might add a little bit more sugar if you want it to be more sweet on the finished side. It's good. I wish I could share it with you guys because I have so much of it now. All right, so that's how you make the lemonade, the Whey lemonade. Let's try a champagne yeast one. Yes, if you're using champagne yeast, you'd use 1/5 of a packet in place of the Whey. All right, so this is a blueberry and rose petal one that I made earlier this week using the champagne method. So let's see if this one is bubbly. Oh yeah, whoa. So that's what happens sometimes. That's why it's good to have this top. So you can see this one is very active, right? Like the champagne yeast makes it super active. And I put in a lot of blueberries, and so it definitely had, you know, like a good amount of fruit sweetness, but also I think I did maple syrup with this one, so it had about 1 cup of maple syrup. So this is something to be aware of, is that I've had it out of the refrigerator now for about an hour, and it's pretty potent, it's pretty active, right? You can see that it's climbing up there, and it's going to come right out if I don't put the top back on. This is another bottle of the same, but this is directly from the refrigerator. Whoa, did you hear that? And this one's going to do the same thing where it's going to try to escape. But it has a little bit less of a pushing action. It's kind of staying down here. So if you keep it in the refrigerator until about when you're going to, you know, serve it, you're less likely to have it explode everywhere. All right, we're doing the champagne yeast style now. I have some nectarines and peaches that I harvested this summer, and I froze them. So I'm just going to stick them right in there whole. So I've thawed them out at this point, like they're mostly thawed. And I'm going to do about, right, for this like gallon size, I'm going to do about 2 to 3 peaches worth. All right, so that's about how full I made my jar with peaches. And then we happen to have some fresh chamomile in the garden. Right, so I have my fresh chamomile flowers. I'm going to put those in. So if I was doing a wild fermentation, I wasn't going to put in any champagne yeast. Like this is where my yeast would be coming from, would be on these flowers. Right, so you're harvesting them fresh. You're not washing them because you don't want to wash off the yeast. Right, or you just got your peaches from the farmer's market and you're bringing them home and you're cutting them up and you're sticking them right into a jar. And I've washed this jar really well, right? I've given it a hot soapy bath. I don't sterilize mine. Some people like to sterilize their stuff. I don't. So I've got my chamomiles in there. I also have some lemon balm that I'm going to throw in there. All right. And just for fun, we'll throw in a couple rose petals. I feel like all those flavors go together really nicely. Peach and nectarine, chamomile. All right, so same idea here, right? We're gonna put in our sugar. So I'm gonna use a coconut sugar for this one. So I've got my jar of coconut sugar. So that's 1 cup of sugar. And I'm going to put in my water. Right. I need more water than this, but we'll start with this so I can just kind of stir it up a little bit. All right, I'm gonna get a little bit more water. All right, and I've got my packet of champagne yeast, and this is one that I've used before, so I just taped it up. I'm gonna open the tape. And before, when you first start using it, you kind of feel it to see like how much is in there, and like do about 1/5, right? Or you can like measure it out if you prefer. But I just find that, yeah, if I kind of do it by eyeballing for myself, I know about what 1/5 feels like. Okay. And then I'm just going to stir that in. And I see actually that a lot of my yeast got stuck to my spoon, so I'm going to use my fingers to kind of push that yeast back in. All right, and now I'm going to put my top on it. Right, with the champagne yeast style, right, this is my These are my pickles. With my champagne yeast style, I always put it in a jar for however many days I need to until it starts to bubble. So I've got it in my jar, and now for the most part, it's like 24 hours, right? So for the next 24 hours, I'm going to be stirring it whenever I can. And again, the reason that I'm doing that is that I'm disturbing the surface. So I'm not allowing other yeasts or other bacteria to take over. I'm also putting oxygen into that environment, which helps to kind of feed the yeast and speed up the yeast. So I'm waiting, after however many days it takes, maybe 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, but usually 24 hours. I'm waiting until I see that bubble and fizz. When I'm giving that really nice stir and it's going to be fizzing up and you can hear it bubbling, that's when I'm going to strain it into my bottle. And then I'll leave it on the counter until the pressure builds in that bottle. And I feel like when I open it, I get the amount of bubbles and the amount of carbonation that I'm looking for. Maybe you don't like it very carbonated. And so in that case, you can put it right in the refrigerator and it won't really have much bubble, but it'll be fermented, right? It'll have infused those herbs and that vegetable or fruit, but it won't be very fermented, it won't be very carbonated. Or if you like it really carbonated, then you're gonna let it go longer on the counter, making sure that you're burping it, right? Making sure that you're opening it like this, right? And you're seeing that those bubbles are happening, because if you leave this on the counter or even in the refrigerator, for days on end without opening it, when you go to open it, there's going to be a lot of pressure in there. And what's happened to me lots of times is that I open it and it shoots everywhere. And now you have soda all over the place to clean up. I've never had a bottle break, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. So again, think about plastic to start, and then from there, you can graduate into glass when you feel more comfortable, or just be really diligent about making sure you burp it and open it. So if I was doing this completely wild with no champagne yeast, I would do the exact same thing we just did, put my flowers and my herbs and everything in there, put my sugar, and I'm just stirring a bunch, and I'm just waiting until that fermentation starts. And it might take longer. It might take 3 to 4 days. What questions do folks have? I've got a couple herbs here that I picked out of the garden that you can consider. This is red clover that's starting to flower now, right? This is a really nice, you can pick the blossoms off or use the blossoms with the top couple leaves there. A lot of folks will use this, especially for kind of hormonal support, during different times of a woman's cycle, as well as just kind of like general health, because it does have a lot of nutrients and vitamins in it. Here's our wood sorrel. It looks like like the 3-leaf clover kind of. There's a bunch of it. Looks like clover, and it's got these little yellow flowers. The whole thing's edible, so you can eat those leaves, or you could put those flowers in there. I've got fennel from the garden, so you could put those fennel leaves in there. Yes. Oof, my dandelion looks so sad, but I picked a dandelion earlier, and you could put dandelions in your soda. I would say that the sepals, the bottom part of the flower is like kind of bitter. So you might want to just pick out all these yellow pieces to put into your soda if you're wanting to do that. I've got some ground ivy here, and here's the little purple flowers on the ground ivy, if you can see those. Ground ivy is in the mint family, has kind of a minty flavor. Here's the the mugwort. Has that white underside and the green on this side. Another thing to consider is that you can make a tea. So you could make, you could boil your water and make your tea the way you usually make tea. So maybe you're making green tea, or maybe you're making an herbal tea, but you want to make that into a soda. Maybe your kids don't drink tea, and you would be able to get them to drink a soda. So you make that tea, and then you put it into a jar, and you put this sweetener in, and you put your yeast in, And then you let it sit, on the counter for a couple of days until it's really fermented and starting to bubble. Then you put it in your bottle. Now you have a way to get that infusion or that tea, into your kids in a way that maybe is more palatable for them or for you. So you could also think of this as a form of medicine, right? If we think back to like the original soda counters, like that's where people went to get their medicine, right? It was to the soda counter and they got their, their mixed drink soda. So that is one way to kind of think about this, as well as like another way to bring herbs into our life. And then for those of you that are adults and like alcohol, this is the exact same process that I use for country wine. So like, for example, I just hold on to old bottles of wine, or I have other people hold on to bottles for me, and I fill it with my own wine. And the only difference is that I start out with a lot more sugar. I do 2 to 2.5 cups of sugar per gallon of water. And I let it ferment a lot longer. And there's a longer process that is part of winemaking. But just so that you know that like the base recipe that we're using here is the same for making country wine as well. How are folks feeling about this? Vicky, you can definitely email me about soda recipes. Here's a couple of books I can share. This one's called True Brews, and it's ciders and kombuchas and all different kinds of things. This one's called Drink the Harvest, and it's all about like fruits and wild things that we can harvest and then make drinks out of it. This is Sandor Katz's Wild Fermentation, and he's got a lot of things from all over the world. It's not just beverages in here, but he also he has a sweet potato fly recipe in here. He's got a smarika, like some of the tapaches in here too, I believe. So he's got a lot of those beverages from around the world. And then this is like my all-time favorite book is The Wild Crafter Brewer. This is Pascal Bauder's book. And he's in California, so he uses a little bit different, flora than we have here, but he really teaches you how to make different kinds of sodas that capture the terroir, capture the environment that you're in. He does these hike sodas where like you go on a hike and you gather things from your environment and you put them in your water bottle. And then when you get home, you make them into your soda. And so it's kind of a cool way to also connect with the nature that you're around by creating these. And that's what I did with my wines. I always made the wines based on whatever fruit and flower were ready at the same time. So this one is mimosa flower and peach. So for me, at least here, the peaches are at the farmer's market at the same time that the mimosa blossoms are out. And I have another one that's cherry and linden flower. So the cherries are ready in my backyard at the same time that linden flower is blooming all over Frederick. And so I kind of did that as a way to like encapsulate that season for myself by combining a flower and a fruit that's ready at the same time. Do folks feel ready to make sodas? Do you feel like this is approachable? It's pretty easy. It's pretty approachable. There's not a whole lot that can go wrong. Like if it goes wrong, maybe it turned into alcohol and that's not what you wanted. So that might be a way that it didn't go as you planned. Or maybe it got too carbonated and it exploded all over the kitchen and now you don't have any soda. That just means you have to start over and be a little more diligent about burping maybe. It's been very, very infrequent that I make a soda that something smells or tastes off. And usually that has more to do with me not cleaning my bottle well enough. Maybe there was like some gunk left over in the bottle and I did get a brush for the bottle. I think that's really important if you're going to do, sodas a lot, is to have a brush so you can really clean the bottle out very well. But otherwise, I really haven't had sodas that fermented in a way that was unsafe or even unpalatable, really. So Anna, you made ginger bug. Nice. Yeah, ginger bugs are great. Did you have problems with the ginger bug, Anna? You mentioned that you had some issues before.
I didn't have. Wait, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just checking. I never had any issues except that I forgot to feed it for like 2 weeks, so I just started another one the other day. But it, I know it was like super fizzy, and I'm not sure if maybe it was like less predictable probably than using like champagne yeast, because I'm sure there's like a lot of variation in how active it is.
Yeah.
But I really liked it. I'm making more of it now. So
Yeah. I love the ginger bug. It's just like it's a lot to keep up with, and you have to keep buying ginger. So that has been my only qualm with it. I have to kind of be in the right mood for it. Or when it's ginger season here in Frederick, like when we get fresh ginger in October, then I'll make some from. We have a local farm here in Thurmont that makes it, that grows ginger, and so I'll make it when we get that.
nice.
Yeah. Well, how are the folks feeling? Carly, yes. So leaves fruit below the waterline, yes. So that's kind of the other reason that we're doing the stirring on a regular basis, right? So we have it in this jar. We're letting it infuse into the water. We're also letting it ferment, and we're letting the yeast kind of do its job by digesting. But at the same time, yeah, we want to make sure that we're not allowing mold to form on the top of the surface line. And so part of the stirring on a regular basis is to prevent mold. Yeah, you don't necessarily have to put like a weight on it or anything, but that is part of what we're doing. Yes.
Awesome. And then we've got a couple of people saying, I feel like I can do this, and it seems very approachable.
It's not hard. You can do it. And there's so many endless variations that you can do. Yeah, get creative.
Anna asks, is there any type of rose that is good or bad to use?
That's a good question. I personally don't know of any roses that aren't possible to use. I would say like if you're getting roses from, like the grocery store or something like that, like those have probably been sprayed, and like we're not always sure like where they're coming from. So I would say as much as possible get them from a source that you feel is safe. There's wild roses that are about to start flowering, the multiflora rose, which is considered an invasive rose but has a really beautiful smell and flavor. I would definitely recommend harvesting those. These were Rosa rugosa, which is a variety that we planted at Foxhaven because they have really big heads, and they also happen to be really really nice smell and flavor. There's one, the Damask rose also has a really like beautiful flavor. So there's definitely ones that have more like appeal to them than others. Oh, nice. Yeah. Let us know how it goes, Anna.
When it's time, yeah. But we don't need it right now.
All right. Any other questions? Any other questions that folks have about making your soda? Can you store them in mason jars? You can. Yep. Yeah. There's a lady here in Frederick, the kombucha lady, that sells her. She sells hers in mason jars. Because it's a wider mouth usually than something like a flip top. You might just have a harder time holding carbonation in there, and you really got to make sure that you're cranking it down to make sure that there's pressure able to build. If you don't care so much about carbonation, then it really doesn't matter, but you can definitely store it in a mason jar.
Are there any types of bacteria, SCOBY, that are especially good at extracting certain medicinal compounds?
Nothing comes to mind, actually. I mean, water itself is really good at extracting a lot of compounds. And like I was saying before, I also like to add vinegars to my sodas because I like that flavor of like the sourness from vinegars. And vinegars are another really great extractor of medicinal compounds. There are some compounds, of course, that can only really be extracted with like higher methods, or you could boil, like if you're going to make root beer, for example, So let's say you're using burdock and dandelion and sarsaparilla and sassafras to make your burdock, or excuse me, to make your root beer. You're going to want to boil those, simmer them on the stovetop to really extract well before you're putting it into the soda. So I don't think of the SCOBY and the bacteria as being so much of the extractors. I think of the water or the menstruum that we're using as being the extractor, and the SCOBY is kind of doing the work of transmuting that sugar into carbon dioxide so that we have bubbles. And we're also getting the benefits of like their bodies being in the, in the soda, and their dead bodies being in the soda. And those are then, prebiotic and probiotic components of the soda. I'm not sure what scout is. Is it safe to assume a scout would take longer to ferment?
Do you think they mean SCOBY?
Sorry, I meant SCOBY. I think it auto-corrected to Scout.
Yeah, it's like, that's not a word. So like if you were going to put a SCOBY into this soda, yeah. So most of the SCOBYs have like a preferred thing that they like to eat, right? And like kombucha SCOBY really likes black tea. You have to kind of train it to accept other forms, right? So like if you put some black tea in this, as well as all the other things, it probably would do just fine. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah. So like when I'm doing kombucha or water kefir, which I used to do a lot of water kefir, I would do my first fermentation in the jar like this with no herbs, no fruit. And I would do my second fermentation with the fruit and herbs. That way, like there's no kind of competition there, because there's a lot of herbs that are also antimicrobial or antifungal. And so those SCOBYs sometimes can be, protective of themselves and like not want to interact with those. Yeah.
Carly says, I used to keep a milk kefir SCOBY in starfruit juice. It didn't grow very much, but it stayed alive just fine.
Yeah, they're like, the nice thing about a SCOBY is that it's a symbiotic community, right? It has like lots of different bacteria and yeasts in it. So there's probably some bacteria or yeasts that were just fine with the starfruit juice. But the reason that it wasn't really growing is that it wasn't a fully vibrant community. Like not all of the bacteria and yeasts were happy in that environment. So some of them survived and continued to live, and some of them didn't. And that's something that you also come across with these SCOBYs if you don't feed them often enough. Like some of the members of the SCOBY are less hardy and they'll die quickly, with neglect. And that's something that I ran into with water kefir, is that if it got really hot in the kitchen and I really needed to feed it every 12 hours instead of every 4 hours, but I was being lazy or, was not around, parts of the SCOBY would die and I wouldn't have as vibrant of a community. And I could tell that based on how it wasn't fermenting well anymore, or it just seemed sluggish. But yeah, they can definitely be trained and be flexible. But they do have their preferences. And like I said, I trained my kombucha SCOBY to accept hibiscus over time. Every now and then I would throw it back with some black tea. And that's what I recommend also if you're going to do like water kefir. You can use water kefir in coconut yogurt to make coconut yogurt. But every so often you should throw it back kind of into that water and sugar so that it kind of gets to revitalize itself, because that's what it wants.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lacey.
Yeah.
The folks who have signed up will receive the recording. If anyone's on Facebook Live, well, you'll have the recording immediately available to watch the whole thing. But if you do have any questions, you can always email us at info@foxhavenfarm.org, and we'll be sure to answer those. And we can also send out some recipes if that's something that people are interested in. Thank you very much. Seeing a lot of thank yous on the screen. Perfect.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It was always nice to see you, and I hope that you make some really seasonal and place-based sodas this season.
All right, guys, have a good rest of your afternoon. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah.